Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, high school teacher in Los Angeles, trying to bring about viewpoint diversity on a whole range of topics. And I have several guests today, Josh, Ryan, and TK from the Minimalists podcast, which is a big podcast that talks about a lot of different topics, but a lot about how to get happiness and get a fulfilled life through less, essentially, which is very antithetical to the way of a lot of Americans and like a lot of the hustle culture. And you got to get your Bugattis and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of the opposite of that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Can you just introduce yourselves to my audience and tell us a little bit about the Minimalist podcast, like how it got started and really like why you've invested so much time and energy into this endeavor?
Sure. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn. I'm here with my good friend Ryan Nicodemus.
That's me.
And TK Coleman is here as well. We host a podcast called The Minimalists. Ryan and I started The Minimalists 12 years ago, back in 2010. We were sort of living the corporate American dream. We had all the stuff, all the trappings of success. And this is after growing up really poor. Ryan and I have known each other since we were fat little fifth graders. And we thought we were unhappy because we didn't have very much money. We were on food stamps and government assistance in our homes, and there was a lot of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, physical abuse as well in our homes. And we thought the discontent was birthed out of a lack of money. And so when we turned 18, we went out and we got corporate jobs and climbed the corporate ladder until about age 30. We were sort of at the pinnacle of 30-year-old success. Yeah, I was a regional manager for 150 retail stores and was making a six-figure salary, had the big house with more toilets than people, the luxury cars, the closets full of designer clothes. And I was making really good money, but I was also broke. I was spending even more money to maintain a lifestyle, spending money I didn't have to buy things I didn't need, to impress people I didn't even like. And then two events happened to me. My mother died, my marriage ended both in the same month. And those two events really forced me to look around and start to question everything. And I realized I needed to simplify my life. I needed to let go of the things that weren't just not making me happy, but they were getting in the way. They were covering up the happiness, the peace, the tranquility, the contentment in my life. And it turns out that, yeah, we grew up poor, but that's not why we were unhappy. We were unhappy because we were covering up the happiness that was already there inside us. And so we don't demonize material possessions. We don't demonize money. I want to be clear about that. But we do scrutinize these things when we try to pursue happiness or contentment through these sort of external means. Yes, our possessions, our relationships, our careers, and even our achievements to some extent can amplify our contentment. They can enhance our lives in some way. But the problem is when we put those things in the driver's seat, they tend to be drunk drivers, and they kind of make us crash after a period of time. And so when my mother died, my marriage ended, I started simplifying my life. Over the course of about 8 months, I let go of 90% of my material possessions, and people around me noticed something was different. People at work started coming up to me and saying things like, "Oh, wow, you seem less stressed," or "What's going on with you? You seem a lot happier lately." And my best friend, Ryan, he came to me one day, we were working at the same place, and he said, "Hey, man, why the hell are you so happy?" So I told him about this thing called minimalism. And he said, "What's minimalism?" I said, "Minimalism is the thing that gets us past the things so we can make room for life's most important things." And it turns out those aren't material things at all.
And then you wanted this similar thing, and then you wanted to share that essentially with more people, that process. Similar thing for you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, when I first got introduced to the idea of minimalism, my reaction was like, okay, yeah, this sounds like some common sense stuff. It sounds like it can help me kind of regain control of some of the things in my life that I lost control over. So I was like, yes, I want to be a minimalist. But I'm like, well, what do I do now? Like, where do we start? So Josh and I, we came up with this idea called a packing party, where we packed up all my belongings as if I were moving. So I had like a 2,000 square foot condo, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2 living rooms, because that's the definition of success in Ohio. You have 2 living rooms. And at least that was my definition of success. And I packed everything up: my clothes, kitchenware, towels, TVs, electronics, frame photographs and paintings, my toiletries. I mean, even my furniture. We literally pretended like I was moving. So over the next 3 weeks, over the next 21 days, I unpacked things as I needed it. So you can imagine, those first few days, I unpack my toothbrush, some bed sheets, some clothes for work, the furniture I actually used, some kitchen utensils. Just over the next 3 weeks, really was getting clear on what I was using out of this hoard of stuff that I had. And after that experiment, I still had 80% of my stuff still sitting in those boxes, just sitting there unaccessed. And, I just had this light bulb moment of like, wow, here I've spent all this time bringing all these things into my life to make me happy. And clearly they're not doing their job. So that's when I decided to donate and sell and just get rid of all those extra belongings. And that right there is really where the minimalists.com started. It started with that 21-day packing party journey.
And then we eventually stumbled across our good friend TK Coleman here. A few years into our journey, we're going out on speaking tours. We started a podcast. We had a Netflix documentary called Minimalism. And we were working on a second film, and TK joined us for that. It was called The Minimalists, Less Is Now. And during that time, we kept bringing TK in because he had a different perspective from us, mainly because he's from the suburbs.
Chicago, man.
Yeah. And what I realized is like the three of us were able to talk about things from three completely different perspectives. We're able to vote for different people. We're able to have conversations without arguing. We're able to have disagreements without fighting with each other. And I enjoyed the conversations we were having. And TK is an educator. I'll let him talk a bit about his story as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of like that character Kramer on Seinfeld. So there's just this guy who just randomly shows up for random reasons. Nobody knows why he's there or where he came from, but he's just like so persistent about Say what?
Just make yourself at home.
Yeah, right. After a while, it's like, okay, this guy's just a friend. He's just gonna hang out with us. I think our first episode was about education, and we, because at that time, well, I don't know how long ago that was, but I co-founded an education startup called Praxis, helping aspiring young professionals launch their careers in a credential agnostic way. And we talked about that. And we talked about different aspects of schooling and the need for a more entrepreneurial, creative approach to helping people meet their educational goals. And I think that the camaraderie was just instant. We had a lot of fun. We connected right away. And it was the first podcast interview I had done where I became friends with those podcasters as a result of doing that show, rather than them just being like a cool professional connection. And the rest was all she wrote after that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, so I've been in the classroom for 18 years, and I've watched the messages that you have, like they're true. They're accurate. Like the proof is in the pudding. It does reduce anxiety and stuff like that. But try telling this to teenagers. I mean, the anxiety is through the roof. I was saying a little bit before we started recording, like I've been in the classroom for so long. I've watched the trends, post-COVID, especially. The level of anxiety is really disturbing. I just printed this out. It's like from the CDC just a couple of days ago. It says CDC report shows concerning increases in sadness and exposure to violence among teen girls and LGBTQ plus youth. It's really crazy. It's like the numbers of kids who are contemplating suicide and feel sad every day is just going up and up and up. And yet we have never had more comfort, like material comfort. You have access to everything. I mean, we're probably similar ages. I'm 40. Like if you wanted to listen to a song when you were in high school, you'd have to like wait on the radio or go to the CD store, go in, buy it, grill it out, open it up, put it in, pick the track, where now kids can get access to everything right away. They have so many creature comforts, and yet they're not doing well. And I guess you could take this into like, the Noam Chomsky manufacturing consent stuff, but everyone's kind of bought into this more and more stuff. And it's like the double-edged sword of a capitalist system. But you guys are up against a lot. I mean, with your message, which I do believe in, you're taking on quite a Goliath here. You're talking about all of corporate America. And corporate America has its, tentacles and kind of everything now, with government and everything, all these institutions and academia and everything. How do you guys go about doing that? I mean, I'm sure you're aware of what you're up against. I mean, everything that these kids are being told on TikTok and Instagram and stuff is about getting the stuff, the Hustlers University stuff. So how do you even begin to take that on?
Well, I think first is to step back and reframe it. Minimalism is not a sociological theory. It's not a religion. It's not a political movement. And I think if we were to adopt the attitude of we're taking on corporate America, we would be so stressed out and so overwhelmed. I mean, I don't know of any individual who can take on corporate America, right? One of the things I teach my high school and college students is that look, changing the world is important, right? There are a lot of aspects of the world that need to be changed, but ultimately, those changes begin with us stepping back and zooming in on what is within our locus of control. And for us, we focus on helping individuals make choices that allow it to become possible for them to opt out of self-defeating patterns of thought, self-defeating patterns of decision making, and so on. So instead of fighting the corporations, instead of trying to make every corporation have a different set of priorities than what it actually has, we talk to people that are affected by it. And we say, hey, within the realm of what you can take charge of, within the realm of how you define success, within the realm of your hierarchy of values, what are some things you would like to let go? And how can we support you in that effort? And to bring it back to the example you gave of how stressed out and how anxious many of our teens are, I think this captures something that's very important to me about minimalism is that minimalism isn't just about letting go of luxury goods. It's not even just about letting go of tangible things. It's about letting go of the tangible and intangible, the psychological and spiritual and physical baggage that weighs us down. And some of that involves the self-defeating stories that we tell. Some of that involves unhealthy beliefs that we have. You know, so many schools, I mean, so many kids, when they come into these schools, they're already showing up with the sense of, I don't belong here. I don't have a shot in life, right? Or you look at the social media thing that you brought up. It's like it's not just that we have the ability to consume music and consume physical goods, but we also have the ability to consume opinions at an unprecedented rate. For most of human history, reputation was primarily local. You know, you only knew the opinions of people that you worked with, that you lived around, that were in your neighborhood. This idea that we could hear what complete strangers we will never meet, what they think about us. Or how about this idea that you can study the lives of people who are miles away from you that you'll never meet, who are better looking than you, who are wealthier than you. If you're 16, you can get online and find 16-year-olds who have already published 3 books or who've already made $1 million. And so now we have so many resources with which we can defeat ourselves. I ought to be looking like that. I ought to feel like that. I ought to be as popular as this person. And so we're consuming a lot of stories, a lot of ideas, a lot of basis for comparison that's weighing us down. And for a lot of the teenagers, it's not about the physical stuff. It's about the ideas that they're taking in and the images of success that they're taking in that's causing them to feel so worthless or like they're behind or like they can't be enough. And helping them unpack that in a way that is both empathetic, acknowledging what they're up against and what they can't control, but also in a way that doesn't dehumanize them by stripping them of agency, in a way that affirms their capacity to reframe their experiences through the power of choice.
Yeah. You know, I think if we're taking on anything, it's probably like the status quo. And there's nothing wrong per se with the status quo if you're doing so intentionally. But if you're just kind of going with the flow, well, eventually, you know, you end up at the falls. And you would be shocked, Will, at how many high schoolers email us, come to our events. I mean, even as young as like 11 years old, Josh and I, we did a 100 city book tour back in 2014. And this mother came up with her son, and we do a hug line afterwards. They come up, you know, wanted to get a hug, wanted to get a book autographed. And we were like, oh, wow. We look at the kid. We're like, oh, it's so great that you came out here with your mom. It's awesome that, did he come out here? Did you drag him out here kicking and screaming? And he's like, no. He's like, I'm the one who asked my mom to come out here. And I'll tell you, like, it is amazing to see this message permeating high schools and junior high even. You would be shocked at how many young people come our way.
Yeah, I actually am surprised because like as much as I try to promote good, you know, healthy habits of like eating and stuff like that to my students, like I have them for, you know, 1 hour a day. You know, at my school now, it's only 3 days a week. I mean, it's nothing. They're inundated with a different message all the time. I mean, you guys have a podcast. Even if they catch your podcast fairly religiously, it's the opposite message is being bombarded at them constantly. So there has to be something in them to recognize the message that I'm getting from everyone else out in the world is not aligned with something. Like they have to recognize that something's off. And if they don't recognize that something's off, then they might not even open up their eyes and even like think for a second, or even like entertain the idea of what you guys are promoting. But there's something in certain people that they see kind of down the road a little bit. But I don't think that that's common from my experience, unfortunately.
People rarely open their eyes until they experience enough pain or suffering that causes them to have some sort of awareness, right? Now, that pain can be simply excess stuff. We started our last film on Netflix with a question: how might your life be better with less?
Yeah.
And the reason we start with that question is twofold. One is it sounds like a how question because everyone's asking these how questions. Oh, how do I declutter my closet? How do I let go of excess stuff? How do I get rid of my sentimental items? How do I not want a new car when I see everyone else wanting a new car? How? Okay, I can give you answers to those things, but it's not going to get you anywhere, right? But I'm really asking a why question there. How might your life be better with less? Meaning, why would your life be better with less? And the reason that question is so powerful is it helps people see the pain points in their life. I would experience more benefits in what areas? And I think those benefits are appreciably different depending on who you are. For some people, it is true that the biggest benefit would be a calmer, less cluttered, easier to clean home. And that's wonderful. For other people, it's less financial burden. For other people, it's, digital clutter is such a burden to me, right? Or sentimental items are a burden to me. Or I would have more time to spend with my family or on a passion project or on something creative. Or for someone else, it could be I have a ton of career clutter or education clutter. I have relationship clutter or calendar clutter. What is burdening you? That gets you to the why, because as soon as you understand the why, well, the how starts to take care of itself.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I'll go ahead, William. Go ahead.
No. Go, please.
Well, I was going to say, particularly when it comes to students and their suffering, their pain, I think it's very easy to underestimate the degree to which they're willing to open their hearts and share these things with us and seek solutions once rapport and trust has been established. One of my favorite quotes is from George Washington Carver, who was questioned on how he was able to come up with so many creative uses for the peanut, for plants, from flowers. And he says, well, they tell me. And the questioner says, what do you mean? The flowers tell you? He says, yes, they tell me. If you love a thing deeply enough, it will whisper to you its secrets. And what George Washington Carver said of flowers, I believe, is also true of human beings. When you love people deeply enough and you take the time to earn their trust and get to know them and to serve them, they will open up their hearts to you and whisper to you their secrets. And sometimes, as teachers, it can be very easy to hide behind positional authority and take for granted the opportunity that we have to see teaching as something that we're entitled to. And in reality, teaching is a reward for earning trust. Teaching is a gift given from the student to the teacher. We can make them sit still. We can make them be quiet. We can make them show up to classrooms they don't want to be in, but we cannot make them learn from us. The only way they learn from us is when we allow ourselves to become their students and we show them that we care. And then they open their hearts to us and say, all right, I'm willing to listen to you. And what I find is that students are very willing to talk about what they're struggling with. They're very willing to take a look at their pain and talk about what they're unhappy with and ask you for their help. But you can't do it by coming in and saying, I'm going to force you to learn some math equations that you don't care about. You got to come in and you got to start with them and say, all right, I have the teacher title, but in reality, I'm just the lead student. And I want to begin the day by being curious about you. Tell me your dreams. Tell me your fears. Tell me your questions. Tell me your concerns. And when you do that, they open up their hearts and you see they're humans just like anyone else. And they too have things that they're struggling to let go of. And that's the entry point.
No, I love that, TK. Like about 10 years ago, I started this whole thing of the first day of school. I pass around a big calendar, and every one of my students has to sign the calendar, and I have lunch with every one of my students. So I have lunch with a different student every day. So we have lunch together, and it's part of the same thing of like getting to know them on a personal level, so that then I can see kind of where their pain points and pleasure points are, and I can use that in teaching my social studies, because essentially, why does a kid really care about the War of 1812? They don't. But if I can compare it, I can connect it to their lives. I think of teachers, especially in 2023, as like translators, because your phone has access to all of the information that you might want. But how does this information relate to you today, tomorrow, and then 10, 15, 20 years from now? That's something that I think is really crucial, and it's helped me to be better at my job, is those kind of personal connections like you're talking about. But when it comes to scaling, part of the reason why I started a podcast, and I want to ask you gentlemen about this, is I know that I'm bad at a lot of things, but when it comes to classroom teaching, I'm good at it. I can take complex ideas, break them down into simple concepts that relate to teenagers and connect those dots. But scaling education is quite difficult. Like if you're the best firefighter, you're the best nurse, you're the best classroom teacher, it's very hard to scale that the way you would with like an app or something. Now there's Khan Academy, but that's not really what we're talking about here. Like that's not what you're talking about, TK. It's not Khan Academy stuff. It's not just like here's the War of 1812, and it was when we fought it up in Canada against the British. It's like, that's not what we're talking about here. Good education. How do you scale? What are your thoughts on the idea of scaling good education, and how do we do it? Because it is something that is so personal. Like, is there something that you guys have learned in doing the podcast that you can reach people in a personal way, even though you're talking kind of out into the ether on over the internet or something like that? I'm curious what your thoughts are. I'll just pick your brains on this conundrum that I'm in.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is I believe it was Gary Vee who said, do things that don't scale. The first thing I would do, without dismissing the question, without dismissing the value of considering the possibility and power of scale, it is important to challenge the presupposition that just because something is good, it's even better if we scale it. Some things are valuable precisely because they are scarce and rare, right? Like, how can you scale the love that you show to your mom or to your spouse, right? Some things are just rare and they're beautiful, and we have to appreciate them for what they are. And we also have to accept our human finitude and our quest to change the world and feel good about ourselves and the difference that we're making. We also have to accept that there are more problems in the world than we as any given individuals can ever hope to solve. When we die, if there's anything we can know for sure, it's that we're going to leave an awful lot of problems left unsolved. And so we have to find our peace and power in knowing that it's enough to not be everything that the world needs, and to focus on your corner of the world. Who can you impact? What is the best way for you to impact? Because we're not all going to be great system builders, great entrepreneurs who are able to create these grand projects that affect millions of people. And that's okay, because most people fall in that category. And yet the individual efforts of most of those people are important. I mean, can you scale the decision of Rosa Parks to not give up that bus seat? I don't know if you can scale that, but that one choice, that one difficult to replicate decision she made had ripple effects, right? So we got to think about the ripple effects of small choices and not just scaling things so that they become big options. The other thing I would say is, you can build powerful systems if you are willing to let go of things depending on you, and if you are willing to empower people to make their own choices. For me, I believe that education ought to be just like fitness, in the sense that every person who has a workout routine, and I think the world of fitness tends to be quite religious in this regard. People tend to think like, oh, that's an idiotic way to approach working out. This is the best way to do it. And yet we have a world where there are thousands of ways to work out, thousands of different types of exercise philosophies and gyms, because we're not governed by this belief that there's one right way to be physically fit. Each person can choose, based on what their goals are, the path to exercise that's going to get them there. I heard you use the analogy when you were talking about college. Should I go to college? And you ask your students, well, should I walk? Should I run? Or should I fly? And then they tell you, well, you should fly. And you go, but what if I'm just going next door? The right method is determined by being clear with ourselves about what the goal is. And so I think the best way to scale powerful education possibilities like the kind you're introducing is to figure out ways to give choice to the individual, to encourage and affirm this entrepreneurial approach to making education available so people can choose the way of learning that's best for them. I'll pause there.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Josh, Ryan, what do you guys think about the idea? Sorry, but this is from the concept. I heard Naval Ravikant saying something along the lines of like, if you are the best fill in the blank, so the best teacher, you should be teaching, everybody or something along those lines. And I mean, that's a little sloppy, but like, I get the principle there is that if we can use technology, let's just say that maybe not me, but someone is like the greatest history teacher and really connects with the students stuff. How would we be able to get something along those lines to every kid? Because there are a lot of bad teachers out there. There's a lot of bad plumbers out there. There's a lot of bad doctors out there. So how do we get the good ones to get access to as many people as possible? Something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, the question that I'm hearing is like, how can you connect more, in this case, with students?
Yeah.
And anytime I think about connecting with others, there are three things that I'm always looking out for. Does this person feel like I accept them? Everyone wants to be accepted. The second thing is does this person feel understood, or do they feel heard? And then the last one is do they feel respected? And so, it's going to be different with everyone on how you can show them that you accept them, how you understand them, how you respect them. But anytime I'm having any trouble connecting with someone, I keep going back to those three things and asking myself, okay, what can I do to gain this person's trust more and be more connected? So to do that through technology, I don't have the answer to the masses, but certainly with each individual person I come across, I can tell that there's different things that I need to do to respect them, to understand them, to accept them.
I think fundamentally we're talking about depth versus width, and sometimes you do something because it's deep. The Rosa Parks thing is a prime example of that, and the ripples from that are significant. When we go out on tour, we do a tour stop, there's depth there, and it's not truly scalable, right? Because we've done 119 events in 1 year before, but I can't do 1,019 events or 10,019 events, right? It just doesn't work that way. And so you can't reach everyone. You can't actually scale it that way, but you can through technology, but then you lose something. You lose some depth through that. Now, there probably is some sort of bell curve there where there is depth and that you get the width of an audience, and perhaps that's what we do with our podcast. We reach a large number of people with the podcast, but then that also leads to some live events. I was at a coffee shop in Ventura last week, and this guy walked up to me and he said, "Hey, I went to one of your tour stops in 2013."
Wow.
And so what
10 years ago.
it's 10 years ago, right? And I didn't remember him. He's like, I was just getting out of high school. I was in college. After attending that tour stop, I decided to drop out of college because it wasn't right for me. Even though we never told him to drop out of college, I would never tell anyone that, right? We don't prescribe that. But as TK was just talking about with you, like, it's about that vehicle. He realized that wasn't the right vehicle for him.
Yeah.
And that completely changed his life. It got him into a creative field that he felt was much more fulfilling for him, allowed him to be a teacher to other people and be a catalyst for fulfillment for other people as well, potentially. And what I realized there is, like, that wasn't my intention. I didn't set out to go to that tour stop in Los Angeles in 2013 to change this guy's life. It wasn't my idea to drag him kicking and screaming to success and his perfect vision of fulfillment. No, Ryan and I showed up, shared our recipe with a few people. They got whatever ingredients out of that recipe that they found were valuable. They threw away the other things and they carried it forward with them. How that ripple affects other people, I'll never know for sure. But I know that that is what is compelling to me about the work that we do. And I don't think it's perfectly scalable. And I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's what it is. It's like, I mean, that's exactly why people get an education. I mean, it's that exact ripple effect that Rosa Parks saying no led to the Montgomery bus boycott, led to Martin Luther King, showing up, this young guy who's like, ready to go and take on, this massive, change throughout the South. And what the Montgomery bus boycott did, it's whatever, 380 days of people really going out of their way to put themselves into uncomfortable situations to prove a point. And just, it was massive. Just this one lady's, move had those effects. I think that's why teachers get into it. They're thinking, if I connect with a couple of students and they go out and they do this thing, you guys have your podcast that might reach, like one person who's just happened to be in a really tough spot. They just stumble across your podcast and they go, wow, this is a game changer. And that's kind of why you're doing it, right? You think of ripple effects. The only reason I talk about scale is because I do see a lot of teachers leaving the profession right now. It's not something, but I talk to a lot of young people. They don't say they want to get into education. Part of the reason is because of, that maybe it's the mentality of like, you're not going to make a ton of money. It's not going to be something that you can truly be that entrepreneurial with. Some people can start charters and stuff like that, but it doesn't look that sexy to a lot of young people. So I was just wondering, like, I'm just trying to think about what are ways that you can apply a growth model to something so personal as education, but it might not fit. It might not, but just, it's something that I think is at least worth going over to make that call at least informed. If you're like, this just isn't something that's meant to scale a whole lot.
And William, it's not entirely a bad thing for more young people to realize that they don't want to go into education. I grew up in the church and my dad's a pastor, and I knew, being his son, the behind the scenes realities, like getting a phone call at 2 a.m. because someone is in jail or someone is at the hospital in critical condition or because someone died. And you see that being a pastor is about being a steward in people's lives. It's about being involved in their troubles and in their difficulties. But there were many other people who grew up with me who saw it as being the speaker who gets to be in front of the crowd, right? And so there were so many people who wanted this role because they saw it as something more glamorous than what it really was. And there's something good about people beginning to develop realistic understandings of what a role entails, so that they can be honest with themselves and say, you know what? I don't think I like the cost associated with this, because the last thing we want is to be putting in front of our kids people who hate kids. The last thing we want is someone going to the classroom and doing it for the money. You want people to do that because they've considered the cost. They know that it's hard, but they're so passionate about the end result. It's something they feel called or compelled to do. So I think it's a good thing when people count up the costs and say, nah, I'm going to be honest with myself and run in the opposite direction. The other thing I'll say about people leaving is it's good to let people know, if they have a passion for education, that you don't have to work for the school system in order to be an educator. Education is anytime you use your insights, your ideas, your stories, your perspectives, and you use that to empower other people to live their best life. And that's something that you're doing on a podcast. You're not just an educator in the school, you're an educator on your podcast. You can do it blogging, writing, a host of other things. And we're starting to see it at the university level, more professors make their way into the public intellectual thought leader space. And hopefully we'll begin to see even more creativity, people modeling for us ways that we can be educators without just showing up in a classroom and teaching. We need more of that entrepreneurial approach by the teachers that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I see it with like the podcast that I listen to. I mean, it's actually interesting because there's so many things, the strategies of life and life hacks, and really fascinating information from all these college professors. And you listen to, like, Huberman or whatever it is, like, even guys that are on Joe Rogan and stuff like that. But rarely do they talk about K through 12 education. It almost never comes up. I was at dinner with Chris Williamson, he's been on my podcast, and he has a really big podcast and stuff. And I asked him, like, how come you guys don't talk about K through 12? And he's like, why would I? He's like, why would you care unless you had kids? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, education, you guys are all about education. I mean, that's what minimalists, it's an educational, to some degree, it's an educational thing of like, here's a way that you can live that might be better suited for you. And then the health podcast, Ben Greenfield or something, like, here's some education on health. But all of this is aimed at adults. But by that point, they're already kind of in like a bad way of thinking. Like, it's just very interesting how all these really smart people who have these huge platforms don't talk about K through 12 education. Why do you guys think that is? Like, why is it so forgotten among all of these really smart people with really big platforms that they don't talk about the very foundations of how you even think? But it's all about education. I mean, all the big podcasts are essentially educational podcasts, but they're just aimed at adults, and we don't talk about the teacher podcasts. I don't know if you've heard them. They're terrible. They're not interesting. Yeah. Like, teacher podcasts in general are pretty horrific, and it's about like Pinteresty, how to set up a great cork board and stuff like that. It's not really in the same vein as the other educational podcasts. Just something that I noticed. I was curious if you guys noticed that, or why you think that is.
I think we have a bad taste in our mouth with respect to education. Everyone knows that school kind of sucks, right?
Yeah.
And there aren't many teachers like you, William. And I think that's one of the problems. I pulled my daughter, she's 9 now. I pulled her out of public school because it was awful. It was she was having nightmares that she was going to prison, but the prison was her school. And it's no coincidence that most schools actually look like prisons. In fact,
They
the high
do.
school that my wife went to was near a prison, and people would accidentally drive to that high school to go visit prisoners, thinking they were there to visit a prisoner, except they just ended up being at the high school. That's how similar they are.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the problems that we have is the education system itself. It's we all knew growing up that we didn't enjoy going to school. Having to learn is not learning. Getting to learn, I think that's the difference when you're talking about these podcasts, any of the ones you mentioned. Ben Greenfield is a friend of ours, has been on the Minimalist podcast a bunch of times, and you seek that out. You get to learn the information
Yeah.
when you're ready and you're seeking it out. The difference is if you just take a kid or you take a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old and you say, hey, you have to learn this information about NAD and about cryo chambers and all these other things, be like, get out of here. I don't want to learn about that. Don't force that onto me. And yet that is what the education system does. We unschool our daughter now. And so it's self-directed learning. And I find that even though we don't have formal syllabus, lessons, teachers, we don't have anything that's formal, she has learned so much more over the time since we've pulled her out of public school. And the truth is, we just don't have many teachers like you. And so kids feel institutionalized, and it's making them miserable. It made me miserable. And I know that if you want kids to learn something, the worst thing to do is force them to learn it.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
recognizing that, by the way, Josh. Like, yeah, I've always felt like a square peg in a career of round holes. Like, I've never felt like I fit in among other teachers, and that's part of why I ruffle the feathers. The NEA doesn't like me and stuff like that because of the stuff that the questions that I ask and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's a big reason is because people just have that bad taste in their mouth from the education system, and they almost have to unlearn the like what they were told learning is, and then they have to, then they can go into learning things that they actually want to learn. Yeah.
Also, William, there are a lot of people, a lot of podcasters having this conversation and talking about education, K through 12. And I can name a lot of names, but I'm deliberately only going to name one, because if I name a second, it might take the risk of distracting for her name. And this is the only name you need to know right now. You got to get her on your show. The Rebel Educator, Hannah Frankman.
Oh,
Rebel Education, Hannah Frankman. I'll introduce you after the show, but you got to get her on our show. There's a lot of people having this conversation. And again, that's the only name I'm going to name because I don't want anyone distracting from hers. Get her on your show. It's going to be an amazing conversation. And you're going to expose your listeners to a lot of other podcasters and thinkers that are doing really great work in this area.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I've had as much as like Catherine Burblesing has a cool school, the Michaela School in the UK. I had her on, and Matt Boudreau, who started the Apogee schools and stuff. Like anyone who's doing alternative things in education, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Like let's just try and figure out what else is out there, because it is like prison. Public schools are like prison. Okay, so I guess the question I have about you guys in regards to minimalism, like your focus is, in a capitalist society, there's a lot of, people who are out there hustling so that they can get the whatever gold-plated yacht or whatever it might be. Okay. But there's also the people, my wife is an immigrant. She came here from the Philippines when she was like 8 years old. They didn't have much. And then she's like a hustler. She's an entrepreneur and started her own businesses and stuff like that. And part of why is because she likes the idea of being financially secure enough that when the S hits the fan, she can help. So someone's in the hospital, a friend of ours in the hospital, and they can't afford, the medicine or something, we can help provide that. So how do you, it's very easy, I think, to and I know you said that you're not anti-capitalist, and that's not what I'm talking about. But if you are going to be in kind of a less is more mentality, I understand that when it comes to like less, drive for the Ferrari or less drive for the Rolex watch or the, Louis Vuitton shoes or whatever. But what about the ability to contribute? Because every charity needs wealth. Every, person who's desperate, this idea of being poor is not a good way to help the poor. So how do you guys address that issue? If someone's like, I'm out there hustling all the time and under all this crazy stress for more, not for me to have all kinds of stuff or flash, but so I have stuff to basically give to people that are needy. Like, does that like make sense? Like, how do you kind of
Yeah.
work within that kind of framework?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you bring up the Louis Vuitton and the Ferrari, and we would never tell anyone they shouldn't own those things.
No, you can't. But
The whole idea is the things that you are chasing or that you're desiring or that you think you need, you actually need those things. And I love the example you gave for, I think you said it was your wife who wants more so she can contribute. That's a great reason why. And unfortunately, people don't chase more because they just want to contribute more. They chase more because they want to have a status symbol. They want to be accepted more among their peers, whatever it may be. They want to have a good photo for Instagram. So I mean, like you said, there's nothing wrong with capitalism. I will say, like, if everyone stopped spending money right now, the economy would crash. And as we saw in 2008, if we spend too much money, the economy crashes. So really, minimalism, I know it sounds extreme, but it really kind of brings a balance. I like to think that I spend or I earn money like a minimalist, which means that I do so deliberately. And when it comes to contribution, that is so huge for Josh and I. In fact, I think so we left the corporate world in 2010 or 2011. And I'll tell you, in 2012, I donated more to charity that year than I had leading up to that point in the corporate world because my priorities changed. And since then, we've provided some school supplies for high schools and in Africa, and we built wells, and we just helped build the first food co-op in Dayton, Ohio, which is one of the largest food deserts in the country. So contribution is something that we are always reinforcing and encouraging people to look at doing more.
I think that consumption isn't the problem, right? It's compulsory consumption, which we call consumerism. Consumerism is the ideology that buying more is going to make you happy or complete. It's the disease of more. And what you're talking about with your wife, I'm agnostic to that. If she's hustling, her life sounds miserable to me. But the key is to me, right? And the question I would have is like getting more so I can constantly contribute more. Okay, that sounds wonderful, but what's it doing for her? Is she making herself miserable in order to contribute? If so, that's just a different kind of consumerism. That's contribution consumerism. Ryan and I, as Ryan just mentioned, we've done a bunch of things to contribute beyond ourselves. And then we partnered with TK recently, and we just funded all the high schools throughout greater Dayton to give them financial literacy education, because that's not something that is taught in high schools and middle schools. And so we found a way to get every high school and middle school student throughout Dayton, Ohio, in and around Dayton, to be able to learn about financial literacy. Because yes, we do learn a lot about calculus, and we can recite the quadratic formula, but we can't balance a freaking checkbook. And we are so worried about our credit scores, not knowing that it's actually a debt score, and some fairly practical things that we can understand. And so it's great to be able to contribute beyond ourselves in a meaningful way, but not if you're hustling so much that it's stressing you out, making you anxious, and actually creating more discontent in your life. It's actually easier to contribute beyond yourself if you first feel contented with the life you're living, if you already feel like you have enough.
Yeah, we're not possession police, right? Like maybe we could do a skit where we pull up on people who are in the drive-through at Starbucks or something, be like, "Hey man, do you need that $2 coffee? Be more minimalist," or we're just no, we're not the possession police. The standard by which people should determine what they want to keep and what they want to let go of, it should be the standard of their own definition of success. And we only let go of things because holding on to them compromises our availability to some higher good, like a life of purpose, a life of passion, a life of peace. And so only each individual can know for themselves what that is. A nice watch is not inherently wrong. A nice shirt is not inherently wrong. It's not about saying, no, 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 you have enough jeans, you have enough books. It's about saying, don't ever give the power to these things as something that makes you worthy. Start with being worthy. And then if you still want the thing, get the thing as long as you have the power to get it and it brings you joy. If it doesn't, don't buy into society's lie that says, you know, even though living in this way makes you miserable, you have to do it in order to belong.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially, I say that almost every day to my classes, to my students, is like, I'm not here to tell you, you know, I mean, it sounds cliche, but like, you know, what to think, but how to think. I'm really just trying to get you to think, like, open your eyes up. And it sounds like that's what you guys do, is like, just actually think about why you're purchasing what you are. Really think about it. Because over the summers here in LA, like before I was married, I would work as a valet parker. I like sports cars. So I couldn't afford sports cars, but I could work at a cool spot in like Santa Monica and drive sports cars when I was a valet. And guy would pull up in like a cool Mercedes or something. I'd be like, oh, wow, that's an SL55, right? 493 horsepower, like the engineer sign. And the guy would just be like, I don't know, bro. It was the most expensive one they had, so I got it. And it's like,
wow.
I was so like frustrated, but it made me think like, wow, if I ever become wealthy, like I'm not going to buy some special Swiss watch, because someone who really loves watches and really is an aficionado of watches that's almost like disrespectful to that, like just to get something because it has like the status, as opposed to like, I might buy a sports car someday and I will really love that sports car. I'll really appreciate it. It brings me some sort of joy because of it's like my area of interest. It's not that is bad. It's just like, why are you making the purchases that you are? And I think a lot of people aren't thinking through it. They're buying the thing because they look left, looked right, and then everyone else has it. So it's the thing you need to get to feel like you're part of the group or something like that. It sounds like that's what you guys do, is just like, think about it. Think about your purchases. Think about what you're doing. Why are you working hard? My wife, she does work hard, but she feels such a sense of purpose because what she's doing, helping people grow their businesses and stuff like that. It's like a lot of work, but you guys work hard too. Like you can work hard and love what you're doing as long as you've thought about it. And I'm with you. I believe that a lot of people they're just going through it. I had William Dereshowitz on my podcast, who wrote a book called Excellent Sheep, about how like kids at exclusive high schools and stuff like that, they are that. They're really good at jumping through hoops. They're really good at doing what they're told, but they're not great at thinking through why they're doing it and things along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, anything that we put out there, whether it's a podcast or a book or, you know, a documentary, you know, I'm always asking the question, like, what did my 25-year-old self need to hear? And that is my target audience. And it turns out there are a lot of people you know, living the life that I was living at 25 years old. And so, yes, being able to talk about how we changed our approach, how we really got clear on the why, what we did to get out of this, you know, tornado of a mess that we got ourselves in. Yeah, I love being able to kind of help people change their perspective that way and get clear on the why.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear that Ryan, TK, and I all have different whys here as well. And respecting that, because it's not that, oh, I need to assign a why to Ryan. We need to have the same exact purpose. And in a weird way, that's a type of self-righteousness, right? It puts me on a pedestal. Well, my why is better than your why. Or even worse, if I put Ryan's why on a pedestal, now I'm putting him on a pedestal. And what does that do? It forces him to look down on me. And that's not compassionate, forcing someone else to look down on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, I think that I hope that people who listen to this podcast, there's going to be people, and maybe it was like what you were going through, Josh, like you almost had to lose a lot of things, lose, you know, job, marriage, to even consider the possibility of less is more in some way. So I think that I hope that this podcast goes out to some people who might go, you know, something's not fitting. I'm feeling really anxious. I'm working my butt off. I just feel really lost. What is the answer? I'll try anything. It's like, well, maybe try what these guys are doing. Maybe, you know, give it a shot. You can always go back to the way you were doing it, but just to consider this. Maybe it's not for everybody, but it is for some people, and it is really useful for some people. You know, then I think it's a win. where can people like follow? I mean, you guys are kind of everywhere. So you said you Netflix, you have a podcast, and I guess I didn't know that you guys do like touring. That's really rad though. So where can people, like, if they want to start, if they're listening to this, they're not familiar with minimalism or anything like that, like where do they start? Is it is it like a particular book? If they're just like, how do I kind of dip my toe into this just a little bit to try and see if it's something that I want to do, you know, some baby steps to get going, like where can they start the journey of getting to where you guys are and where you believe in?
Yeah, I mean, everything that you mentioned there, podcast, documentary, all of that, everything is over at theminimalists.com. And I'll tell you though, it's not about starting with a specific action or, you know, start with your junk drawer because that's going to be the easiest to get rid of. It's more about starting with that question, how might your life be better with less? Because like Josh said earlier, once you truly understand the why, the how to starts to present itself.
I think also that if you're looking for something on a mechanical level, you're like, I'm so overwhelmed by all my stuff, or because let's face it, our material possessions are just a physical manifestation of what's going on inside us. So if you have a lot of physical clutter in your home, the average American household has 300,000 items in it. And that'd be great if it was bringing us more joy, peace, tranquility, bliss. But as you know, it's doing the opposite. It's bringing us stress and debt and discontent and overwhelm and anxiety and all of these other emotions that are crippling us. And so if you're looking for somewhere to start, you can start with the stuff. We have something called the 30-day minimalism game. It's a free calendar you can download from our website. I'll give you a quick overview real quick. Just go to theminimalists.com/game to download that calendar, by the way. It's free, but here's how the game works. You partner up with someone at the beginning of the month, a friend, a family member, a coworker. You both say, hey, we're going to get rid of some stuff. You can bet whatever you want. A nice meal, $1, $1 million.
Josh still owes me $1 million.
You could bring that Mercedes you were talking about. Yeah, whatever you want to bet. And at the beginning of the month, you say, all right, we're on the first day of the month, you get rid of one item. Starts off really easy. You're overwhelmed. You don't know where to start. Anyone can get rid of one item. Second day of the month, 2 items. Third day of the month, 3 items. Getting that momentum you need. But by day 12, you're like, I have to get rid of 12 things today. And tomorrow I got to get rid of 13 things. And next day it's 14 things. Whoever goes the longest wins. If you both make it to the end of the month, then, well, you've both won because you've gotten rid of about 500 items. Now, we've had tens of thousands of people play that 30-day minimalism game. Tens of thousands. They share their pictures online. And it's amazing because one item leads to hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of items that you're getting out of the way. And you're clearing the clutter. That's not going to make you happy. What it's going to do is make the room to understand what a meaningful life looks like for you.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be hard for people. I think it's like, is it a Confucius quote or something? It's like, before you heal a man, make sure that he's willing to give up what made him sick.
Oh,
I think I don't know if it's Confucius, but it's something like that. Like it's going to be hard for people. Like as you were going over that, I was like, what would I get? Oh, there's a hanger. I don't need that hanger. Like I'm looking around, like trying to almost like make it as painless as possible. But eventually it's like, but I might someday use that thing that I haven't touched in 5 years. Well,
yeah, we call that the just in case rule. We have something else you can download for free as well.
Yeah.
30-day, I'm sorry, it's the 16 rules for living with less. We call it the minimalist rule book, also at our website. It's free. One of the rules in there, we call it the just in case rule, also known as the 20/20 rule. If you have anything you're holding on to just in case, you can let go of it because you can replace it for less than $20 in less than 20 minutes from wherever you are. And at first that sounds like a rule of privilege, like incredible privilege. Like, I don't want to go around spending $20 every single day on replacing things that I got rid of. But the truth is, all of those things you were holding on to just in case, you never end up needing them again. Ryan and I invented that rule in 2011. And so 12 years later, we've had to use it 5 times between the two of us. And so it cost us, what, $100? But it gave us permission to let go of tens of thousands of just-in-case items in our junk drawers, in our basements, our attics, our closets, storage lockers, garages, living rooms, second living rooms. We have all of these spaces that we hide these just-in-case items. Just in case, the 3 most dangerous words in the English language. And so we can let go of those. Of course, let me be clear about something. Letting go is not something you do. Letting go is something you stop doing. You stop clinging, to the excess stuff. You stop clinging to the toxic relationships. You stop clinging to the career that's making you miserable. You stop clinging to the expectations of others. You stop clinging. That is the only way to let go.
Yeah. No, I like it. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. And I think that people who this is really going to resonate with people who say something's off. You know, my Xanax prescription is always empty, and I got to keep getting more because I'm just overwhelmed with so much. Like overwhelmed by definition is like you have too much going on. So maybe you should,
Busy.
you know, minimize it.
Yeah. I think busy is the worst 4-letter word in our language.
Yeah.
It's a status symbol, right? It's, what are you up to lately? Oh, I've just been so busy. And
Mhm.
so you should say that because what? It means like, look at me, look how important I am, look at the status that I have. I'm so busy. Well, what's the truth behind it? Whenever I say I'm busy, I'm really saying my life is out of control. Everyone else's emergency has become my urgency, even if it's not urgent to me. And so I'm letting everyone else dictate my calendar. No wonder it's so full of excess. It's calendar clutter. And earlier you talked about, oh, you guys must work hard. And that might be true, but it's focused work. It's not busy work. I don't have a whole lot on my calendar because I relentlessly say no, 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 no. Unless it is a hell yeah, well, then sorry, it's a no.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. That's an hour. I really appreciate your time. I think that again, for the listeners out there, like this is worth looking into. If at the very least it just gets you to think about your actions more, that's what I see my job as. Just like think about, don't go through life on autopilot. Live life with your eyes open. And if you might make decisions that I don't like, I tell this to my students, it's like, you want to become a heroin addict or something, I don't recommend it. But if I have a conversation with you, really weighed it out, you've really thought about it, you've done a ton of research, and you've said, this is why this is the choice for me, I'm actually semi-okay with that, I suppose. I just don't want you to make decisions on autopilot. And I think a lot of people are. And it sounds like everything that you're doing is getting people to open up their eyes more to the decisions that they make and then really assess, is this good for me or not? Things like that. So thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate having you here. There's going to be links in the bio and everything like that. So the minimalists.com is where everything's at. Same name for your podcasts. Same thing, Netflix, everything like that. Really appreciate having you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And definitely, TK, we'll connect over bring on more good educators. I would love to do that.
I look
All right,
forward to it.
guys. All right, take care.
Thanks, brother.
See you.
Thank you.